Hi guys, it's Shelby Henry, and today I'll be presenting the finance and budget. So as we try to decipher the difference between equity, equality, and adequacy, first of all, I'll tell you, I first read this and my brain was just swimming. I'm not a math person, a number person, so I had to read and reread and take copious notes. So we'll start off with equity. This requires fairness, and according to the book, Resource Management for School Administrators, adequacy and equality are used to define equity. Different forms of equity include horizontal, vertical, performance, opportunity, and social, and each school should receive equal per student funding. The equity model is preferred by over 40% and suggests that states should make efforts to equalize the amount of money spent per student so that schools in poor areas have as many resources as schools in wealthier areas. I see this in the more affluent districts, what they're able to obtain versus our rural communities. You just see that it just doesn't appear to be very fair, and it's based on that. Equality refers to the idea the same amount of money to be distributed to the same causes through the district. Those different equalities include racial, gender, students with disabilities, and undocumented children. So what we're saying here is that everyone should have the same amount of money, regardless what area that they're in. Finally, we have our adequacy, and this is the ability of a school district's budget to sufficiently meet the cost of its expenditures. Schools should receive funds necessary to ensure that all students have the opportunity to meet defined academic standards. 37% of the people chose the adequacy model, which suggests that states should make efforts to direct education money where it's needed most, so students with special needs or in poorly performing schools will get enough money to provide an adequate education. What we saw is that in this adequacy model, the book showed the visual with the chart. This tremendously helped me out. Obviously, the goal is, or the ideal school would have high achievement and low cost. However, that's not always the case. Again, it is based on, some of those could be based on not having the equity involved. So totally agree with this. The takeaway I got from this is that the allocation funding varies from state to state. So we saw the chart from our readings and we could see where money was being spent. Texas never seemed to be up towards the top. In fact, we noticed that Texas was spending fewer dollars than the average per students. Our policymakers determine how the funding schools will receive and how it should be allocated, whereas states see school boards and personnel make those budget decisions. So what happens is that the members in the community have a say in the funding of public education through their votes. So that's why voting is important. States also have the responsibility to make sure schools have sufficient funding to operate, and schools have a responsibility to ensure every student gets a quality education. In most cases, funding is divided by students. So states may also allocate funding based on specific programs, in some cases using federal money for programs that are implemented at the federal level. But most local funds are received by property taxes. 90% of funding comes from state and local avenues. However, due to COVID, the federal government provided additional funds to district. So what are the trends that we're seeing is that there were a lot of federal funds. However, they are going to be coming to an end in the upcoming future in 2023 and 24. I also noticed there was a chart that showed, for instance, my district had only used roughly I think 23% of these ESSER 3 funds. So, which they know that they have to get them all used by September of 2024. But back to the trends, the pandemic caused reduced attendance, thus causing less state revenue, plus added new expenses and challenges trying to educate students who have lost time. There was lower enrollment, means school districts will lose money unless the state takes action. So initially the schools were given ESSER funds, but according to TEA, those districts are now seeing ESSER funds reduction. So they have ESSER 3, which is the elementary and secondary schools emergency relief. These funds need to be used by September 24 or they'll lose it. As you can see in Texas, only 30.9% of CRSSA funds, which is the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act funds, have been used. These also have to be used by September, but in 2023. Just recently this week, President Biden proposed, or I'm sorry, within the last couple of months, President Biden proposed budget increases, funds for high poverty schools and student mental health so they can put more money into our counselors. And then, of course, I'm sure most districts have this problem, is that insurance premiums are changing over the year. And typically what happens is that they go up and we don't see that in our take-home pay. So unfortunate. And so the sources I had was TASB, GPISD, EdWeek, and also the information provided in our resources.